right, it's great to be back in Calgary. I've been to Calgary a bunch of times before. Over the last 5 years, I used to work in Saskatchewan at St. Therese. I heard you guys out there. And I would come to Calgary every year for Thanksgiving, so it reminds me of turkey and stuffing, and that one year we had nothing but pizzas to cook in the oven. But it's great to be here. I love Western Canada, and it's great being back. And I have to tell you that I believe in miracles because it's not easy to get 800 people from across Canada in the same room in the middle of winter. So already we're on a good track. Last year, I was traveling from west to east. A lot of people have come from east to west, and I know a lot of people were flying in for this conference. Well, the last time I was traveling, we decided to drive. I had just been in Saskatchewan for 5 years. It was time to move back to Halifax, Nova Scotia, where I grew up. And so I bought this truck that I could put all of my possessions in. I took a job out east, and on December 22nd, I started the long drive out east with the goal to make it there by Christmas. I had a little pit stop in Minnesota where I was visiting with my girlfriend's family. She is not my girlfriend anymore. She's my fiance. And I invited her. She was going to come and visit my family for the first time in Halifax. And I figured, if you can survive a road trip across Canada in the middle of winter, you're good enough to marry me. So I load my car up and I drive down to Minnesota. I get to the border and I'm loaded up to the top with everything that I own in the world. And I guess I didn't consider that the border guard was going to think it's pretty weird I'm going down to America. He looks at the back of my truck and says, "Oh, I probably should check all that. You better go through." So there was first hurdle number one conquered. And then after a week in Minnesota, we started the long drive to Halifax, and things looked pretty good for a little while. Becca and I were listening to music. We were having a great time, swapping stories. And after the first day, which was a 22-hour travel day, we stopped in Ontario at a friend's house, stayed the night. But as we got closer, I kind of felt like the car was, moving a little bit from side to side. I thought, wow, it's pretty icy out here. We better take it easy. Or maybe there's a lot of wind blowing the car a little bit. Better be very careful. Well, the next day we get in the car. We made it about 4 hours. We passed through Ottawa, Montreal, and into rural Quebec, just past Quebec City. And the car is kind of shaking a little bit. And I wonder if something's wrong. Should we stop? Until eventually the car just clunks out. And we have to pull over on the side of the road because our rear tire had kind of gone askew like that. And we lost one of the bearings had become broken and was spilling balls from the bearing for the last, 100 kilometers or miles. And so now it's December 23rd, and the closest town is a place called Montmagny, Quebec. Ever heard of it? Neither have I. So, in the middle of rural Quebec, where no one speaks a word of English. I haven't spoken French for about 10 years since I graduated high school. My fiance, girlfriend then, is from America. She doesn't speak a lick of French, has never even been to Quebec before. We're on the side of the road, and to make it worse, we were racing a blizzard. I figured if we just stay in front of the blizzard, we'll be okay. Well, anyway, by the time we stopped, it started catching up real fast. So we get a tow truck to take us to a Canadian Tire where I was able to cobble just enough French to figure out that the car wasn't going to be fixed until December 27th. So we start thinking, how are we going to make it home for Christmas? The first time I get to introduce this beautiful woman to my family, it's very important that we get there as soon as possible. My dad's on the phone. He says, "I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to drive through the blizzard 10 hours to get you." I'm like, "Dad, you can't do that." And so what we do is we hunker down in a McDonald's in Quebec, listening to French Christmas carols. And we look up the nearest train, and there happens to be a train station that goes right through Montmagny all the way to Halifax. All right, that's a good sign. Later that night, there's a train that's supposed to go at 11 p.m. that'll take us into Halifax on Christmas Eve. So we decided to hunker down, leave the car with everything that we own, except for a little suitcase in the Canadian Tire, get to the train station at 11:30 p.m., only to realize that the train station doesn't have an inside. It's a platform. And so we call Via Rail, and they say, "Oh yeah, just stand on the platform, and they're going to see you, and they'll stop." So I guess the train was a bit delayed too, so we stood on the platform for a half an hour, another half an hour, another half an hour, until finally, cold as we've ever been in our entire lives, we hear that glorious sound of a train's whistle. And it comes in, and I'm standing right on the edge because I want to make sure they don't miss me. And so we get on the train at, I think it was 2:15 in the morning, frozen like popsicles, grateful just to have a seat to sit in and fall asleep in the train instantly. Well, next morning we woke up on the train at about 8 in the morning, and it's Christmas Eve, and we got to watch the rolling hills of Quebec and New Brunswick go by, and it was really, truly very beautiful. We got in at 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve, just in time to get home, get showered, cleaned up, and make it to a midnight mass. So that was the last time I went across the country by car, and I think it's going to be a little bit before I try it again. But I was thinking of that story not only because it's Christmas and Rise Up and the middle of winter and cross-country trips, but because when I was reading the gospel that we took our theme from, Come and See, I was lingering on that question that Jesus gives to, I think it's Andrew and John. What are you looking for? What do you seek? I was reading it and I kept thinking, what are your eyes fixed on? And I was thinking of this trip. That whole trip, my eyes were fixed on Halifax. We were gonna make it no matter what. Nothing was gonna stop us. And every decision I made was in light of the fact that we were gonna get to Halifax no matter what by Christmas Eve. And I started thinking about, well, what happens when you fix your eyes? What happens when you desperately seek something? Well, that informs every decision you make. If I didn't have a goal, it would have been easy to go to the United States, see the snowstorm coming, and decide to go south instead because Florida is about as close to Halifax as Minnesota is. So that decision to get there oriented every decision that came afterwards. What do you seek? What are you looking for? A friend was telling me that direction determines destination every single time. And so I think Jesus likes to ask questions of us so that we realize what it is we're truly looking for. Not what we're looking for today or tomorrow, but ultimately, what is it that drives every decision that I make? What is underlying in every career move, in my education, the way that I exercise, the disciplines of my daily life? What drives every decision? What do I seek? What am I looking for? And at different stages of my life, it's been different things. Maybe at one point it was to be comfortable, get a good job, go to a good school, retire early. Maybe for some people, it's to be respected, for people to listen to them and take their advice and see them in positions of power. A lot of people, I think, what they seek, what drives them is a fear of loneliness, of being alone. They say that our generation is the most disconnected of any generation, and yet we're more connected than anyone else ever has been with digital media. Some, like the great saints, what they seek is to advance the kingdom of God and to love Jesus as much as possible. Jesus loves asking us these questions so that we can get to the heart of what drives us, so that we know where we're going. Jesus loves asking these questions so that we can orient ourselves towards what truly our deepest longings are, what we're really seeking at the very heart. I just finished a terrific book by C.S. Lewis called Till We Have Faces. Has anybody read Till We Have Faces? I'd never heard of it until just a couple weeks ago, and as I was reading, it's incredible. C.S. Lewis retells the story of a Greek myth, and in this story, 90% of the book, roughly, is a complaint against the gods. This is a Greek allegory, and one of the people in ancient Greece is writing this long letter, essentially making a defense in court why the gods have betrayed her, all the horrible things that they've done to her, and makes this long complaint, and then the last 10% takes a bit of a turn. But 90% of the book is this story of this woman who has been betrayed, the gods have, she thinks, taken away her beloved sister. She was born disadvantaged according to her other family members. And so I read this story of these long complaints and this history of the ways that she's been hurt or never complained. And then in the end of the book, after her whole life, she goes before the council of the gods and she reads this complaint to them. And it's a lifetime's worth of bottled up hurt and pain and emotions that she never was honest to herself or to the gods about, until she makes this confession and all of a sudden healing starts to occur. And as I was reading this, I was wondering, how often are we scared to be honest with God about what we truly seek, what we desire, and what we're looking for? I don't know why a lot of you have come to Rise Up. I know some of you probably have been here 5 or 6 times, so what do you seek? I think there's a staff discernment brunch later on somewhere in the back. Some of you maybe met CCO a few months ago and don't know why you're here, but it was just easier to give in and relent against the brigade of different recruitment efforts and just sign up and then get them off my case. Some of you maybe don't know why you're here and kind of wandered in or don't want to be here. And what do you seek? Well, it's hard to put into words exactly. I saw someone actually who was a guy in a row full of women. Well, we all know why he's here. So, no judgment. I met my future wife at a Catholic conference, so I understand. But we often aren't honest with ourselves about what our deepest desires are, and we definitely don't tell God that because he won't understand. In this story, Till We Have Faces, when she finally makes this complaint, she has this divine encounter afterwards. And she wonders, why have the gods been so silent all of this time? And after this divine encounter, she realizes, oh, they didn't utter anything because they themselves are the answer. The gods themselves are the answer. The most mysterious book, in my opinion, of the Bible is the book of Job. If you've ever read it, it's this long list of suffering. And right near the end of Job, he says, I have heard of you before God, but he has a divine encounter. And he says, but now I see with my own eyes. And he's able to understand why God has worked the way he has in his life. A lot of time we have a lot of questions for God, things we've never been honest about asking, things we've never dared to ask. Maybe it sounds too impious, but we need to be honest with God about what we're looking for so we can begin to answer the deepest desires of our heart. Because I think ultimately God doesn't desire to give us answers. I think he desires to give himself to us. I think Jesus comes as the Word of the Father. And when we're honest with God about our deepest desires, the questions in our hearts, the things that we don't feel safe to ask anybody or talk to people about, when we bring that before God honestly, for the first time maybe, well, then we're compelled to listen to his honest word back. And what is the word of the Father? Jesus Christ. It's a person. Bring every concern you have before the Lord, but expect an encounter back because he wants to encounter you with his love in Jesus Christ like you've never experienced before. I know because I had questions about God in my own life. I was moving out a few years ago, and I was digging through my parents' basement and found an old journal from the very first retreat I ever went on in my life. And my mind fluttered to the thoughts of the saints and their writings and their journals and the things that become published and when they're canonized. I thought, what spiritual wisdom was in that journal from my very first retreat back when I was a kid. So I open it up. This is before I really had ever experienced God in a personal way. And I start to read, and at one point during this conference, the speaker had said, if you were the only person in the world, Jesus still would have died for you. And I thought, oh, what did I say to that? And I read my journal, and what I read was, Jesus would have died for me. He didn't even know me. He probably didn't even know I would ever exist. God gave me a great gift in that he reminded me, he gave me a glimpse into my soul before I knew him. What was my complaint? What was my honest longing in my heart? To be known by God. Not that he's some divine clockmaker who winds the watch and walks away, or some impersonal deity who maybe created the world but doesn't care about it. I needed to know that God was a father who loved me personally. I didn't even know that he knew me or even knew I would ever exist. That rocked my world. So 8 months later, when I went to a youth conference, a lot like this one, I didn't go because I was interested in the content. I didn't go because I was interested in hearing about the gospel. I went because there was a group of girls at my parish who went to the same conference. But I also went because when I was around my youth group, I encountered something that was unlike anything I saw in school or in the hockey locker rooms. I encountered pure joy and charity and people who wanted to build each other up and cared about one another. And I didn't know if I believed in God, but I sure believed in whatever feeling I got when I was around these excellent, beautiful people. So I go to a conference, and it's a room full of people like this, and I start to realize that the people at this conference have the same joy and love for one another and charity as my friends at the youth group, and I start to put two and two together that what they're talking about is having a personal relationship with God, the kind of relationship I didn't even know was possible. So then I started making an honest prayer. For the first time in my entire life, I realized, okay, I don't know if God's real, but if I pray, if he's not real, nobody will know. But if he is real, then I can invite him to have the kind of relationship that he has with my friends and the other people in my parish. So we were at a night just like this one, and I started to pray in my heart, not holding anything back. And I said, Jesus, I don't know if you're real. I don't know if you love me, But if you are real, then I want to invite you into my heart, and I want to have a relationship with you. And instantly, I had this sense of God's love that was too deep for words. Words didn't describe it. It was a divine encounter where I knew God loved me. I knew he cared about me. I knew he knew me. I knew he wanted what was best for me. And then and there, I decided that I wanted to live every day of the rest of my life for God. It changed the whole direction of my life and what I lived for. And all it took was an honest prayer on my part to, for the first time, to go before the Lord with what I seeked and what I needed and what the deepest desires of my heart were, and present them to him and let him answer with himself. Let him give himself to me for the first time. It was scary. It was worth it. I encountered God's love in a different way just a couple months ago, or a couple years ago, actually. I was doing a youth camp up in northern British Columbia, where I'd done youth programs before, and we get there a day early, and there's 30 or 40 kids coming for the week, and our cook was coming in shortly after us to bring all the food, and she had done shopping and brought $3,000 or $4,000 worth of groceries, filled up her SUV. So we have the kids, and we're starting to do icebreakers and activities, and we get a phone call, and it's our chef saying, hey, I got in a little bit of an accident. If you could send someone to pick me up and pick the food up, that would be great. I wasn't speaking that night. I had no responsibilities, so I figured, sure, I'll go. So I get in my car, and I start driving. It's about an hour away that I have to go meet her. And I'm looking on the side of the road for a fender bender, or maybe like a police car or something. Any sign of this cook who I've never met before. She was this cool, fiery Puerto Rican lady. And I drive and drive and drive until I see something on the side of the road. And I think, no, that can't be her. Actually, I took a picture of it. Let's see. Not a fender bender. So we get to the side of the road. I meet this woman for the first time. I try to comfort her, but she has this determined look in her eye. And she says, we need to get the food to the kids so that they can have their retreat with the Lord. And so I wait with her in the cop's car, and I don't know what to say. And the police don't know what to say because they tried to call an ambulance, and she wouldn't let them. And so a tow truck comes. It drags the car up onto the side of the road, and like a bolt of lightning, she shoots out as soon as it's safe and opens up the car, and there's $3,000 worth of groceries and every food you can imagine. And the one smell that sticks with me to this day is a mixture of coffee grinds, mayonnaise, and ice cream. Because those things I don't think survive the roll. And so she gets in there and she starts grabbing things and different boxes of food and all kinds of, and she's handing them to me, and I'm gingerly trying to take them and stay dry and not covered in muck, thinking, surely we can't save very much of this. And so I go and put it in the car, and I come back, she hands me another armful, and then I come back a third time, and she's covered up in her arms with, I told you, coffee grinds, mayonnaise, and ice cream. And I just have to accept, I think I'm getting dirty here. And so I start getting covered with this stuff, and I go back again and again and again, and I think 5 or 6 different times I said, I think that's enough. I don't think we can save any more. And she said, no, we can get one more box. And sometimes you have experiences in your life where upon reflection later, you realize, wow, like that really relates to my relationship with God. Or, oh, that's a really good analogy for God's love. This was not one of those times. But not for the reason that you think. This was not one of those times because in that moment, I felt like God was declaring to me what his love was like for me. Because every time she went back and salvaged another box of food that I thought we should give up on, I was reminded of the fact that God does not give up on us no matter how dirty or messy or mucky we think our lives are. And I spent that evening polishing eggs. Washing hundreds of eggs. And the eggs we couldn't wash, we put in a bowl and had as omelets the next day. It was incredible. We spent 3 hours going back and forth salvaging food that I would have given up on long ago until eventually I was covered head to toe in this stuff. The car was covered on the inside. Everything was mayonnaise, coffee grinds, and ice cream. And I stopped caring about how dirty it was because God was speaking to me. This is what it's like when you love something so much that you will do anything to get it back, to save it, to redeem it. And so I just said, okay, Lord, I'm in 100%. Back and forth, until I went to bed that night reeling because I'm supposed to be giving this retreat, and I feel like God just showed me in the most clear way what his love is like. if we're being honest with God and we're expecting an honest answer back of his son, I think a lot of us forget that even though we have sin in our lives, even though we disappoint ourselves and others, we turn away from him, he doesn't care about that muck and dirt and grime. He is going to wash it off. He's going to keep going back until he gets every single one of us. He's never going to stop reaching out for us and welcoming us back. He's never going to stop longing to be in relationship for us. He's never going to stop trying to fulfill that deepest longing in your heart, that thing that you seek, that you're longing for, that keeps you up at night. He's never going to stop inviting us to come and see what this relationship is like. There's a beautiful quote it was from Pope John Paul II first, and then Pope Benedict quoted it at his inaugural address, and now I'm quoting it, so at least two of those three people are very holy. And it goes like this. He says, if we let Christ into our lives, we lose nothing, absolutely nothing of what makes life free, beautiful, and great. Only in this friendship. That's an important distinction. No, only in this friendship are the doors of life open wide. Only in this friendship is the great potential of human experience truly revealed. Do not be afraid of Christ. He takes nothing away and he gives you everything. Yes, open wide the doors to Christ and you will find true life. Amen. If that is the kind of life that your heart longs for, if that is what you seek, then this invitation is for you. Come and see. Thank you.